If you're a business owner doing your own marketing, you might be feeling a little bit all over the place right now. You use AI every day, research in one tab, a draft started in another, a brand voice document you repaste into every single conversation. Now multiply that by every channel you're supposed to show up on, and you've got a whole lot of cutting and pasting going on. So you may feel like, yes, things are probably faster with it, but also more overwhelming. So if you're nodding, then this video is for you. The problem isn't a shortage of tools or maybe that you don't have the right one. There are plenty of tools around. What's missing is a content workflow. So I'm going to show you a content system you can actually run by chaining a few different skills together in Claude Cowork, and how you can make this repeatable so that it runs on its own with one single command. I'm also show you how you can probably take this further by using something like Notion or Google Sheets. So I'm going to be honest with you. For a long time, that was me too. So I'm looking for a system, and everywhere I looked, the systems were enormous, right? 12 agents, 30 skills, multi-layer diagrams that kind of look like a subway map. So I'm creating content online since 2016, and my mantra has always been minimum viable first. So you want to test it, start small, test, and then grow from there. So that's exactly what I did. I built the smallest version that produces one finished content piece. Then I tested it and then I let it grow. All right. So here's what we're going to be using. We're going to be using Claude Code and a small set of skills. We're going to build it for a AI blog system. So once you see how the different pieces fit together, you can point the exact same shape at a YouTube system or a LinkedIn system or anything that you're working on to create content. So today I'm going to be using a demo persona called Danny. So Danny's a curriculum specialist for homeschooling families. She sells a coaching program to other homeschooling families as well. So let me show you how it's going to be set up. Now, before I show you the system, I want to walk you through the content principles that this system is based on. First, every single piece in the system has to earn its place on the customer awareness spectrum. So you have a right fit customer or client, but they may be at different points along this journey. Someone realizing they have a problem needs different content than someone deciding whether they want to buy. If you have a new offer or a service you're launching, work back to what people need to know and believe before saying yes to your offer. So you want to stack up your content in that way. And we always have to remember the third thing is it's not about more content. It's not about the volume, because content is never the end game. Especially if you're a coach or a consultant or a service provider, publishing more doesn't get you more clients. 5 pieces that move the right person closer to working with you beats 50 pieces that don't really do anything at all. So I'd rather create less and make each piece carry real weight. So that's why the system is deliberately kept small. Now, with that out of the way, let me show you the process behind the system. All right, now, here's the question that almost nobody stops to ask, right? What's your actual content creation process? So mine might be a little bit different from yours, and that's the whole point. What I would suggest doing is, if you have a process, you can hand it to Claude directly. Tell it your steps, tell it what tools you'll use, and ask it to propose a content system for you. And you can see what it comes back with. I would just speak to it using a tool I use, Whisperflow, and I'll link it below. So here's a prompt you can use, and you'll see that it'll ask you a couple of clarifying questions before it starts building it out for you. Now, for the purpose of this use case, I actually map my process to a chain of small skills where each step saves a file, the next step reads. So each block is one skill, all right? So one skill has one job, one input, and every one of them reads from that strategy doc that we'll create at the very top, okay? So you've got ideation, research, brief, draft, review, visual, and then push. So this is not one giant skill, but a chain of small little ones. Now, why do we do it in this way? Because you can iterate and you can improve on it in a modular fashion. So when you work on one part and you feel that, hey, this isn't right, or it's not giving me the output that you want, you can fix that before you work on the rest. Now, let me show you how you can create these skills. There's one thing you want to turn on first, and that is the Claude Skill Creator. All right, you don't write the skill, you describe the job that you want the skill creator to do. Now, this is the thing. For me, I have learned through trial and error, and the key question that you always want to come back to is, what does each skill need to do its job well and do it reliably? So this comes down to a few different questions. What reference files should it read? All right. What information am I arming the skill with to do its job properly? Where do I want a human in the loop? Okay, where should the output live? Now, the next thing you want to think about is, all right, where can the skill go wrong? Okay, that becomes a rule section, all right? The hard lines that it should never cross, set up front, all right? The next thing is, where does it keep tripping up in practice? That becomes a gotcha section. And this is the difference between a skill that keeps making the same mistakes and one that learns and gets smarter. So you may not have the rule section or the gotcha section when you just start out, okay? You add them when you start working with the skill, and you can just get Claude to do this for you. So for the first block, ideation, here's a prompt that you can use. Now, I've put all of these build prompts into a resource in the description that you can go and get it. Now, if you take a look at this, I'm not teaching Claude to write. I'm teaching it to think about my content in the way that I do. So what it does is it decides what to write about next. It reads what you've already said about your business, who you serve, what offers you have, what stage your audience is at this quarter. Okay, all of that lives in a strategy doc, all right? The one file I'll build with you in just a minute, and it gives you back a list of ideas that fit your strategy. Okay, now 3 things I want to highlight. It starts from the awareness stage, not from what is trending, where there is a gap others are not filling, and whether it fits my strategy. All right. So it checks my published archive. So it also never hands me a topic I've already covered. So this is where I go back to the foundational content principles that I introduced to you at the very beginning of the video. All right. So this is very important, specifically for a coach or a service provider or a consultant. You don't want to create topics that are trending, but what would allow people to want to discover you and want to work with you. Now, the second block is research. Now, what it does is it figures the angle before you write. You give it a topic and it looks at 3 things. What's been said about it, the audience language that is showing up in places like maybe Reddit, or if you have your own Facebook group, you could even point it at that, and what nobody is saying yet but should be. And this is where your context files are really important. So if you have a section in there that talks about your point of view and how you are different from the industry, how your thoughts or how your frameworks are different from what is out there, then your skills are going to be able to pick that up and then align the research that they find with the direction that you're going in. Now, brief. What it does, it turns the topic and the angle into a structured plan before a single word gets written. So the working title, who it's for, the awareness stage, and this is the important part, the SEO bit, all right? So this is baked in as well. So the primary keyword as a real question people actually type, it drafts the headings as questions, it bakes in the structure needed for AI research. So all of this is added into a reference section within the skill references, okay? Now, the draft writes the actual piece. So it takes everything the previous blocks produced, the idea, the angle, and then it actually reads your voice file, how you write, the phrases, anything that you want it to reference, what you say that nobody else does, and then it writes the draft in your voice. Now, review is what I call the noise filter. It reads the finished draft and it scores it against a rubric before anything ships. Now, what I baked in here into the rubric is 5 things, all right? The hook, the angle, the audience language, whether it's built for AI search, and whether it sounds like you. So this is where it's going to catch any type of AI tells, phrases, that kind of scream a robot wrote this, and sends it back to rewrite. So if you have a jargon list or you have a list of words that you don't use, it blocks anything that you don't want to come into your content, all right? That's what this rubric helps with. Now, for visual, it plans the visuals before you publish, all right? It reads your brand style, your draft, and then it plans what visuals this content piece would need, okay? So it doesn't actually work on the visuals, it just plans them out. Now, the last one is push. Now, what this does, it's basically gets your piece out the door, all right? So I would just say something like push this to WordPress as a draft and log it in the calendar, all right? So you can actually connect it to via an MCP, and then you could also connect it to Notion. And what it would do is it would push it, it would fill everything up from your meta tag, your description, and then it would also log it in to your calendar. So these are your 7 skills, the ones that we created just now. So let's start by creating one folder, right? I am just going to call it Danny's Demo Blog System. And inside it, I've got 2 folders. I've got my blog and my context folder. Okay, now the context folder is the one that most people skimp on. And that's the part that's going to decide whether your AI sounds like you or whether it sounds generic. So I am going to load it up with Danny's brand context, brand visual style, brand voice guide, writing samples, target customer, and so on. If you look at this, I have a publish posts Excel sheet, and this is going to keep a tab of all of the different posts that Danny has already published. Now, what I've done is created a new project for Danny. So we've got our instructions. We've also connected it to our context folder. And now we are going to check if we have a couple of, I've got Nano Banana, I've got a couple of things connected in there. All right. And we are just going to check if Claude does have access to. So before anything fails, while we're running this midway, I'm going to say, can you check that you have access to Perplexity and MCP? So I'm going to allow the task, and then it is testing the connectivity right now. So it's saying that, okay, both are connected, they're working, all right? And then now I am going to build my content strategy doc. Okay, so this is a prompt and I'm going to give you access to that. You can grab it in the description. So it's going to start by reading the context folder, Danny's context folder that I showed you just now. Okay, and the template, all right, that I've loaded in there. So it's going to come back with the blog purpose, ideal client, content buckets, the awareness mix, all right, and then differentiation that Danny has, all right. So how is she different from the rest? Okay, so it is also going to ask a couple of things if it needs your input. All right, so I'm just going to go and say save the file. All right, and then what we are doing is basically we have a content strategy document. Now, I'm not going to create a skill for this because it's very likely you're going to create a content strategy once every quarter or maybe twice a year. All right, a skill is something that you need it to be done repeatedly. So I don't see the need to create this right now. All right, so we have our content strategy. I'm just going to open this, okay, right here. So it's going to be in the folder. Okay, so now I'm just going to say, give me some blog post ideas. Okay, and it is going to take and run. All right, so it has created it's done a duplication pass, it's checked existing posts, and it is coming up with a couple of ideas. Now, if you take a look at this, the hook here is provisional, all right, which means that it is not yet done for a way that is needed for a headline. All right, so I'm just going to go here and say, let's research this topic. Okay, and then it is going to continue with the next set of the blog. So we've just done ideation. All right, so I have a very simple prompt here because everything is already in the skill. So I don't need to give it details. The details are taken care of in the skill and it knows how I want it done. Okay, so it's going to run the research block. It's loading the skill, loading the references, all right, the topic that I confirmed. And if you take a look over here, it is using Perplexity. I've used it via the Zapier integration, but you can also connect Perplexity directly, or you could also use Tevily if you prefer, all right? So I've started using Tevily recently and I feel that I like it better than Perplexity, okay? So then what it's doing right now is it is still running a search. And it is trying to look at audience, any data it can find about my right fit client or customer. All right. So it is going to do more web searches. Now, if you connect, and I've not done this here, okay, but if you connect it to a fire crawler or something like Tevily has a crawler as well, then it would probably be able to go into Reddit and grab those searches. Okay. But okay. So it's grabbing some stats as well. And then it is actually writing the research.file. All right. So if you take a look at this, it is presenting all the the audience signal, the competitor pieces, and it's also saying, okay, where exactly this is saturated. It's also saying what the frame is as it's aligned to Danny. So this gives you an idea of where you can frame your content pieces so that you're not saying what everyone else is saying. All right. So it's going to point out the differentiation. Everyone is saying this is your angle. Okay. And what exactly is the frame? So what I'm going to say is I'm just going to say prepare the brief for this post. That's about it. All right. Prepare the brief for this post. It's going to take the brief skill that is already created and it's going to start loading the skills and references. Because remember, all the instructions are within the skill. Okay. If you have something like RFs, you can, or SEMrush, for instance, you can connect it as a keyword tool, but I did not do it for this particular instance. Okay. So it is going to use fallback on Perplexity instead. All right. So it is continuing on with the search. So you can build your own tech stack, right? You can choose the particular tools that work for you and you can use those instead. Okay. So it's going to give a couple of topics, a couple of keywords, and then, okay, it's also going to come up with the structure and format, all the metadata that needs to be populated onto WordPress. Okay. It would raise anything that it needs your input on. Okay. But I'm just going to go ahead for the sake of this video. All right. So I am pretty much going to say, all right, save the brief. So what is going to happen right now is it is going to save the brief to the very same folder. So if you take a look, it is drafting the post, and here you go. You have the final post here, and it is actually even nudging you to say that, do you want me to run the next step, which is the review and score? So when I run review and scroll, it's saying that, okay, there are no M dashes, no banned phrases. It's also giving me a verdict that, okay, this is 24 out of 25. It's clean on everything except one placeholder. All right. So there is one placeholder because we said that it's not supposed to fabricate anything. All right. So it's left a placeholder there and it's saying, okay, give me the placeholder and then I can save it in. All right. But either way, the review file is there. So what I'm going to do is, for the sake of this video, all right, I am just going to say I'll fill it in later. Let's proceed to plan the visuals. Okay, so it is going to say that, okay, you're overriding the block and you're going to plan the visuals now. Okay, so it is loading the visual block skill and the design references, and then it is going to go ahead and plan all of the visuals. So it's going to give me the entire visual plan right now, and I am simply going to say save the visual plan. Okay, and then now the next step is to go ahead and push this to WordPress. So when I say push, what it's going to do is it's going to push the script and all the SEO descriptions and all of that onto Word once you have your WordPress MCP connected. All right. So if there is an image you've created, all right, it is also going to go ahead and it is going to add that for you in your Word post. All right. So it will not publish it for you. It is just going to go and save it there as a draft. Now, once you have the 7 skills, here's how you can take it further. All right. You don't necessarily need to do this step by step. All right. So here's a prompt that you can type that will kind of chain all of these skills together, and then it just runs it in a single chain. So I would just say deploy sub agents and create a new blog post for next week. So run the steps in sequence, all right, not in parallel. Run them in sequence, and without waiting for my input, auto select the strongest topic in the ideation step. Don't run them in parallel. So I would just type something like this, and then you would just watch it go. Okay, so ideation will pick the topic, research will find the angle, and then the brief plans it out, and then everything just kind of runs. Okay, so with these 7 skills that you've built, the key thing would be for the first few runs, you would want to have a close look at it, see where you can tighten, where it's kind of drifting a little bit, where you would want your output to be a little better. And once you feel that, okay, this is pretty much how I like it, and then this is where you can automate it. And then you could just use a prompt like I mentioned. And you could also set this up within that project to run on schedule. All right. Now, one of the things I mentioned was this does not have to live on your computer. You could take this on to your Google Sheets or Google Drive. You could also use Notion. The 7 skills don't change. All right. But where it reads your file from changes. All right. So the diagram as a whole, the way it works, the workflow doesn't change. All right. You're just moving the system into tools that you already live in and you already work with. Okay, so that is what makes this system something that's more accessible, all right, where you can move from something like you could use Notion, or like I mentioned, you could use something else. So don't think of a very over-engineered, complicated system for this to work. It could be really something as simple as these 7 skills that you're chaining together with a single prompt. So if you want the content strategy template that I shared, as well as the prompts that I've shared in this video, then you can grab it at the link in the description. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope this gave you a couple of ideas for how you could approach your own content, especially if you're thinking of it. So if you want the content strategy template that I shared in this video, as well as the prompts that I mentioned, you could grab it in the link in my description below.